I thought I was finally getting my dream wedding. The man I loved, the perfect proposal, and an engagement party surrounded by family and friends. Everything felt like it was falling into place until his ex showed up 6 months pregnant. At first, I thought she just wanted to cause a scene, but then she looked me straight in the eye and said she was still his wife. The entire room went silent as she pulled out the papers to prove it. That's when I realized the man I was about to marry was living a double life. 3 days ago, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Today, I don't even know if the man I was supposed to marry in 2 months is who I thought he was. My entire world has been turned upside down, and I need to get this all out because I'm going insane keeping it to myself. My name is Sarah, I'm 29, and until this weekend I was engaged to the man of my dreams. His name is Michael, he's 34, and we've been together for 2.5 years. He's everything I ever wanted in a partner. Successful, kind, funny, and absolutely devoted to me. At least that's what I thought. Michael has been married before. His ex-wife Jessica was, according to him, a complete nightmare. He told me she was manipulative, mentally unstable, and had made his life hell for the 3 years they were married. Their divorce was finalized about 6 months before we met, and Michael always said it was the best thing that ever happened to him because it led him to me. I'd never met Jessica, but I'd heard plenty of stories. According to Michael, she'd tried to take him for everything in the divorce, had spread lies about him to their mutual friends, and had even shown up at his workplace to cause scenes. He said she couldn't accept that their marriage was over and had been stalking him for months after the divorce. Michael painted her as this unstable woman who couldn't move on, and honestly, I felt bad for him. I thought he deserved someone who would love and appreciate him after going through such a toxic relationship. 6 months ago, Michael proposed to me during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. It was absolutely perfect. He'd arranged for us to have dinner at this beautiful vineyard at sunset, and when he got down on one knee, I swear the whole world stopped. The ring was stunning. A vintage Art Deco design that he said reminded him of me because it was classic but unique. I said yes immediately. I was head over heels in love with this man, and the idea of spending the rest of my life with him felt like a fairy tale. We started planning our wedding right away. Michael wanted something elegant but not too big. About 150 people at a beautiful venue in the hills outside the city. We set the date for October 15th, just 2 months away from what happened this weekend. Everything was falling into place perfectly. We'd found the perfect venue. I'd found my dream dress, and we'd sent out save the dates to all our friends and family. Michael seemed just as excited as I was, always talking about our future together, and how he couldn't wait to call me his wife. My maid of honor, my best friend Lisa, insisted we needed to have an engagement party. I wasn't sure it was necessary since our wedding was only a few months away, but Lisa convinced me it would be fun to celebrate with everyone before the stress of final wedding planning kicked in. Michael was all for it. He said he wanted to show me off to everyone and celebrate our love properly. We decided to have it at my parents' house. They have this beautiful backyard with a garden that my mom has been working on for years. We invited about 50 people, close family and friends from both sides. Michael's parents flew in from Chicago, along with his sister and her husband. My whole family was there, plus our closest friends from work and college. The party was planned for Saturday afternoon. We'd have cocktails and appetizers in the garden, some speeches, and then a sit-down dinner. Lisa had helped me coordinate everything, from the flowers to the caterer to the string quartet we'd hired to play during dinner. I spent the week before running around making sure every detail was perfect. I got my hair and nails done, picked up the flowers, and even bought a new dress. This gorgeous navy blue wrap dress that Michael said made my eyes look incredible. Friday night, I could barely sleep. I was so excited to celebrate our engagement with everyone we loved. Michael seemed excited too, though I noticed he seemed a little more stressed than usual. When I asked him about it, he said he was just nervous about giving a speech in front of everyone. Saturday started perfectly. The weather was beautiful, sunny, but not too hot, with a light breeze that made the flowers in my mom's garden sway gently. The caterers arrived on time, the quartet was setting up, and everything looked like something out of a magazine. I spent the morning getting ready with Lisa and my sister Emma. We had mimosas while doing our makeup, and I remember feeling so happy and grateful for my life. I kept looking at my engagement ring and thinking about how lucky I was to have found someone like Michael. Michael had stayed at his apartment the night before because he said he wanted our entrance to the party to be special. We'd arrive together and make a grand entrance as the happy couple. Looking back, I wonder if there was another reason he didn't want to stay over. Guests started arriving around 2 p.m. My parents were in their element, playing host and showing off their beautiful garden. Michael's parents seemed to love my family, and everyone was mingling and having a great time. Michael arrived around 2:30, looking incredibly handsome in a navy suit that complemented my dress perfectly. He brought me a bouquet of white roses and kissed me in front of everyone, which got a sweet awe from the crowd. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. For the first hour, everything was absolutely perfect. People were laughing, sharing stories about Michael and me, and everyone seemed genuinely happy for us. My dad made a sweet toast about how proud he was to welcome Michael into the family, and Michael's mom gave a speech about how she'd never seen her son so happy. I was standing with a group of my college friends laughing about something silly when I noticed a commotion near the front gate. People were turning to look, and the conversation was starting to die down. I couldn't see what was happening from where I was standing, but something was clearly wrong. That's when I saw her. A woman was walking through the garden toward our group, and she was very obviously pregnant. Very pregnant. Like, probably 7 or 8 months along. She was wearing a simple black dress that hugged her bump, and she had this determined look on her face that made my stomach drop. I'd never seen her before, but somehow I knew immediately who she was. This had to be Jessica, Michael's ex-wife. But that was impossible, right? Why would she be here, and why was she pregnant? The conversations around me were stopping one by one as people noticed her. She wasn't exactly trying to be subtle. She was walking straight through the middle of the party like she belonged there, making eye contact with people and nodding politely as she passed. I looked around frantically for Michael and spotted him near the bar, talking to his college roommate. He hadn't seen her yet, but I could tell the moment he did because his face went completely white. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Jessica walked right up to the center of the party where Michael and I usually stood together for photos and toasts. She cleared her throat and raised her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Excuse me, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt such a lovely party." The entire garden went silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. I felt like I was watching a movie. This couldn't actually be happening at my engagement party. "My name is Jessica, and I'm Michael's wife." The words hit me like a physical blow. Wife? Not ex-wife. Wife? I heard several people gasp, and I saw Michael start pushing through the crowd toward her, his face a mixture of panic and anger. "Jessica, what are you doing here?" he called out, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I'm here because I think Sarah and her family deserve to know the truth before she makes the biggest mistake of her life." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everyone was staring back and forth between Jessica, Michael, and me, and I had no idea what was happening. "The truth about what?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Jessica looked directly at me, and I was surprised to see that her expression wasn't angry or vindictive. She looked sad and tired. "The truth is that Michael and I are still married. We never got divorced. And this," she said, placing her hands on her pregnant belly, "is his baby." I'm not sure what happened next because I think I blacked out for a second. The next thing I remember clearly is sitting in one of the garden chairs with Lisa crouched in front of me, holding my hands and asking if I was okay. The party had exploded into chaos. I could hear raised voices, people asking questions, someone crying. Through the noise, I could hear Michael's voice, loud and angry. "Jessica, you're out of your mind. We got divorced 8 months ago, and that baby isn't mine." "Really, Michael?" Jessica's voice was calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Because I have the papers right here that show our divorce was never finalized. Would you like to see them?" I forced myself to stand up and face what was happening. Jessica was holding a manila folder, and she was pulling out what looked like legal documents. "The divorce papers you thought you signed? They were fake. I never submitted them to the court because I found out I was pregnant the week before our court date. I thought we could work things out for the sake of our baby." Michael was shaking his head frantically. "That's impossible. I have a copy of our divorce decree. I've seen the papers. You have a copy of fake papers that I had made. The real divorce was never filed." Jessica's voice was getting stronger, more confident. "I can prove it. I brought copies of everything." She started pulling out more papers from the folder, what looked like court documents, medical records, and other official-looking papers. "And before you try to deny that this is your baby," she continued, placing her hand on her belly again, "I have the conception date from my doctor, and it matches up perfectly with that weekend we spent together in February. You remember, Michael, the weekend you told me you wanted to try to work things out?" I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. February? That was just 4 months ago. Michael and I had been together for over 2 years. We'd been living together for 6 months. How was this possible? "I know this is a lot to process," Jessica said, and her voice was actually kind, "but I have proof of everything I'm saying." She started laying out papers on one of the cocktail tables that had been set up for the party. People began gathering around to look, though everyone was trying to be respectful of the absolutely insane situation we were all witnessing. "Here's our marriage certificate from 2018, she said, pointing to one document. "Here are the divorce papers that Michael thought he signed. You can see they're notarized but never filed with the court. And here are my medical records showing my due date and conception date." Lisa grabbed my arm and whispered, "Do you want to get out of here? We can go inside." But I couldn't move. I needed to see this. I needed to understand what was happening to my life. Jessica pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something. I also have text messages from Michael from February through April, including photos he sent me from places I know he told you he was traveling for work. She turned the phone toward me, and I could see a long string of text messages. I couldn't read them from where I was standing, but I could see photos that looked like they were taken in restaurants and hotel rooms. "The Hampton Inn in Sacramento," she said, pointing to one photo. "March 15th. He told me he had to go there for a client meeting, and he asked me to meet him there to talk about our future. I still have the hotel receipt." My heart stopped. March 15th. I remembered that trip. Michael had told me he was going to Sacramento for a boring client presentation and would be back the next day. He'd even complained about having to stay at a cheap hotel because the company was trying to save money. But if Jessica was there with him, and this one, she continued, scrolling to another photo, was taken at Giuseppe's Italian restaurant in the city on April 8th. He said he wanted to take me somewhere special to celebrate the baby. April 8th. Michael had told me he was having dinner with his college buddy who was in town for one night. He'd even texted me from the restaurant, saying he was bored and wished he was home with me instead. I felt like I was going to throw up. Michael was red-faced and looked like he was about to explode. "Sarah, don't listen to her. She's completely delusional. We got divorced and I haven't touched her since." But even as he was saying it, I could see doubt creeping into his voice. And the way he was looking at Jessica's pregnant belly, there was something there. Recognition? Fear? "If you're so sure the baby isn't yours," Jessica said calmly, "then you won't mind taking a paternity test. I brought the paperwork for that too." She pulled out more papers from her seemingly endless folder. "We can go to the lab on Monday morning. Results take about a week." The party guests were standing around in shocked silence, watching this drama unfold like it was a TV show. I could see my parents near the house looking absolutely mortified. Michael's parents were standing by the bar, his mother with her hand over her mouth in shock. "I want to see those papers," I said suddenly, surprised by the sound of my own voice. Everyone turned to look at me. I realized it was the first time I'd spoken since Jessica had dropped her bombshell. "The divorce papers, I want to see them." Jessica nodded and handed me the folder. "Everything's in there. The fake divorce decree that Michael has, the real court records showing no divorce was ever filed, and the medical records for the baby." My hands were shaking as I took the folder. Lisa came and stood next to me, looking over my shoulder as I opened it. The first document was a marriage certificate for Michael James Peterson and Jessica Marie Collins, dated June 15, 15, 2018. I'd known they were married, but seeing the official document somehow made it more real. The second document was labeled Decree of Dissolution of Marriage and was dated November 3rd of last year, about 2 months before Michael and I met. But as I looked closer, I could see that while it was signed and notarized, there was no court filing stamp, no case number, no judge's signature. "This looks real," Lisa whispered. "It is real," Jessica said. "I had a lawyer friend create it using the template from our actual divorce paperwork. Michael never bothered to check if it had been filed with the court." The third document was from the Superior Court, and it was a search result showing that no divorce had been filed for Michael Peterson and Jessica Collins. And then there were the medical records. The medical records were the hardest part to look at because they made everything feel so real and immediate. There was an ultrasound photo dated 3 weeks ago, showing a baby that was clearly almost fully developed. There were doctor's notes about Jessica's pregnancy progress, and there was a due date, November 15th. But the most damning piece of evidence was the estimated conception date, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I remembered that Valentine's Day clearly because Michael and I had gotten into a small fight about it. He'd said he had to work late on a big project and couldn't take me out to dinner. I'd been disappointed but understanding. He'd been working really hard on a new client, and I knew how important his career was to him. Instead, we'd celebrated the weekend after with a nice dinner at home. He'd been distracted and tired, and I'd assumed it was because of work stress. But according to these medical records, he'd been with Jessica that night, on Valentine's Day, making a baby. "The conception date could be off by a few days," Jessica said, noticing what I was looking at. "But my cycle is very regular, and February 14th is when it happened." I looked up at Michael, who was standing a few feet away looking like he was about to have a panic attack. "Is this true?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "Sarah, I can explain." And that's when I knew. If he could explain, it meant there was something to explain. If Jessica was completely lying, if none of this was true, he would have said, "No, it's not true." He would have been absolute in his denial. Instead, he said he could explain. The party guests had formed a loose circle around us, and I realized that everyone we loved was witnessing the complete implosion of my relationship. My grandmother was sitting in a chair looking confused and upset. Michael's college friends were standing with their mouths open. The caterers had stopped serving food and were just standing there with their trays, not sure what to do. "Everyone should probably go inside," my mom said, appearing at my elbow. "Give them some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "I want everyone to hear this. Michael, if you have an explanation, I want to hear it now, in front of everyone." Michael looked around the circle of faces staring at him, and I could see him weighing his options. Finally, he let out a long breath and ran his hands through his hair. "Okay," he said. "Yes, I saw Jessica a few times earlier this year, but it wasn't what you think." "What was it then?" I asked. "She kept calling me, texting me, saying she was having a hard time adjusting to the divorce. She said she was depressed and needed closure. I felt bad for her, so I agreed to meet with her a few times to help her work through it." Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you're calling it?" "It's the truth," Michael snapped. "I was trying to help you move on by sleeping with me." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Several people gasped, and I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Michael's face went bright red. "That was a mistake. It happened a couple of times when we were talking about our relationship and we got emotional, but it didn't mean anything. I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be my fiancé admitting to cheating on me with his ex-wife, who wasn't actually his ex-wife." "A couple of times," I repeated. Michael looked like he wanted to disappear. "Sarah, you have to understand." I was confused. Jessica was telling me she still loved me, and we have so much history together. I made some mistakes, but they didn't mean anything. "I love you. I want to marry you." "A couple of times," Jessica said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Try a dozen times over 3 months. Try him telling me he wasn't sure if he'd made a mistake divorcing me. Try him saying he needed to figure out what he really wanted before committing to anyone else." I looked at Michael, waiting for him to deny what she was saying, to tell me she was exaggerating or lying. Instead, he just stood there looking defeated. "Is the baby yours?" I asked quietly. He was quiet for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered, "but it could be." That's when I lost it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know I was screaming. I think I threw my engagement ring at him. I know Lisa had to physically restrain me from lunging at Jessica, even though logically I knew this wasn't her fault. The party completely fell apart after that. Guests started leaving in groups, most of them looking completely shocked and unsure of what to say. My parents started cleaning up while shooting Michael angry looks. His parents approached me to apologize and said they had no idea any of this was happening. Michael tried to follow me when I went into the house, but my dad blocked him at the door. "I think you've done enough damage for one day," my dad said in a voice I'd never heard him use before. I spent the rest of the evening in my childhood bedroom, crying while Lisa and my sister took turns bringing me tea and tissues. Every time I thought I was done crying, I'd remember some other detail. How Michael had seemed distracted during Valentine's weekend, how he'd been getting more phone calls lately and stepping out of the room to take them, how he'd been working late more often. All the signs had been there. I'd just been too trusting, too in love, too naive to see them. Michael showed up at my parents' house early Sunday morning, looking like he hadn't slept. My dad answered the door and told him I didn't want to see him, but I came downstairs anyway. I needed to hear what he had to say for himself. We sat in my parents' living room while my mom hovered protectively nearby, and Michael tried to explain himself. "Sarah, I know how this looks, but you have to believe me when I say that I love you and I want to marry you," he started. "While you're still married to someone else and possibly having a baby with her? The marriage thing is just paperwork. Jessica and I have been emotionally divorced for over a year, and the baby, we don't even know if it's mine. But it could be." "Yes, it could be, but Sarah, even if it is, that doesn't change how I feel about you. We can work through this." I stared at him, trying to understand how he could think anything any of this was workable. Michael, you cheated on me multiple times with your wife, who you're still married to, and she's pregnant. I know it's complicated. It's not complicated, I shouted. It's impossible. Even if you get a paternity test and the baby isn't yours, even if you actually file for divorce this time, I can never trust you again. You've been lying to me for months. Michael started crying then, which was something I'd never seen before. Please don't do this, Sarah. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll do anything. You can start by leaving, I said, and don't contact me again until you figure out your life. If you're going to be a father, you need to deal with that. If you're going to get divorced, you need to deal with that. But you can't drag me through this mess while you figure it out. He begged for another few minutes, but eventually my dad walked him to his car. That was the last time I saw him. Over the next week, I couldn't stop myself from trying to verify Jessica's story. I know I should have just walked away and moved on, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand exactly how badly I'd been betrayed. I started by calling the courthouse myself to verify the divorce records. The clerk confirmed that no divorce had been filed for Michael Peterson and Jessica Collins. She also told me that if someone had forged court documents, that would be a felony. I found Jessica's Facebook page and spent hours scrolling through her posts from the past year. Her story seemed to check out. There were posts about being confused about her relationship status, about trying to work things out with Michael, about finding out she was pregnant. The timeline matched everything she told me at the party. I also did some detective work on Michael's recent behavior. I went through our shared credit card statements and found charges that now made sense. Dinners for two when he'd told me he was eating alone, hotel charges when he'd said he was staying with work colleagues, flowers purchased on days when he hadn't given me any. The evidence was overwhelming. Jessica had been telling the truth about everything. About 2 weeks after the engagement party, Jessica texted me. She said she'd convinced Michael to take a paternity test and thought I deserved to know the results. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Part of me thought it would be easier to move on if I never found out whether the baby was his or not, but another part of me needed closure. The results came back 99.7% certain that Michael was the father. Jessica texted me a photo of the results along with a message. I'm sorry you had to go through this. You seem like a really good person, and you deserved better than what he put you through. I cried for about an hour after getting that text. Not because I was surprised by the results, but because it made everything final. Michael was going to be a father with his wife. The life I'd thought we were building together had been a complete illusion. It's been 6 months since the engagement party, and I'm slowly starting to put my life back together. I moved out of the apartment Michael and I shared and got my own place across town. I threw myself into work and got a promotion that I'd been hoping for. I started therapy to work through the trust issues and betrayal trauma. The hardest part has been dealing with all the wedding plans we'd made. I had to cancel the venue, return the dress, and call all our guests to tell them the wedding was off. Most people were understanding, but it was humiliating to have to explain over and over again what had happened. Michael tried to contact me several times in the weeks after the paternity test results came back. He sent flowers, wrote letters, even showed up at my new apartment once. He kept insisting that he'd made mistakes, but that we could work through them if I'd just give him a chance. I never responded to any of his attempts to contact me. There was nothing left to say. About 2 months ago, I got a text from Jessica letting me know that she and Michael had finally filed for divorce. She said it was an amicable split. They'd decided they wanted to co-parent their baby but couldn't make their marriage work. She also told me that Michael had been asking her about me, wanting to know if she thought I'd ever forgive him. She said she told him he needed to focus on being a good father and leave me alone. I appreciated that text more than she probably realized. It felt like closure in a way that nothing else had. Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby boy last month. She sent me a photo along with a birth announcement, which I thought was a sweet gesture. The baby looks exactly like Michael, which would have been devastating a few months ago, but now just makes me grateful that I found out the truth before I got legally entangled in their mess. I've been dating someone new for the past month. His name is David, and he's nothing like Michael. He's a teacher, he's never been married, and he's incredibly straightforward and honest about everything. On our second date, I told him about what had happened with Michael. I was nervous about sharing such a dramatic story so early, but I wanted to be completely upfront about why I might have some trust issues. David's reaction was perfect. He was horrified by what Michael had done to me, but he didn't treat me like damaged goods or like I was crazy for having been deceived. He just said he was sorry I'd gone through that and that he hoped I'd give him a chance to show me what honest communication looked like. We're taking things very slowly, which is exactly what I need right now, but I'm optimistic about where things might go. For the first time in over a year, I'm excited about the future instead of dwelling on the past. This experience has taught me some hard but valuable lessons about love, trust, and relationships that I want to share. First, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid for asking questions or wanting proof. Second, verify important information. If someone tells you they're divorced, ask to see the papers. If they say they're traveling for work, don't feel bad about wanting to know details. Trust should be earned through transparency, not demanded blindly. Third, don't ignore red flags because you're in love. I overlooked several inconsistencies in Michael's stories because I wanted to believe him. Love shouldn't require you to turn off your critical thinking skills. Fourth, it's okay to end things even if you still love someone. I loved Michael deeply, but I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so fundamentally. Love isn't enough if there's no trust or respect. Finally, take time to heal before dating again. I waited almost a year before I felt ready to trust someone new, and that time was necessary for my emotional recovery. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. My engagement party disaster was the worst day of my life at the time, but it led me to the life I was actually meant to have. Jessica really did save me from a nightmare that would have been much worse than a ruined engagement party. If we'd gone through with the wedding, I could have faced charges for bigamy, even though I would have been an unknowing victim. Michael would have definitely faced serious legal consequences. To anyone who's going through their own relationship crisis, it's going to be okay. Even when it feels like your world is ending, you're stronger than you know. And sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead us to the most beautiful new beginnings. Trust the process, trust yourself, and never settle for someone who doesn't give you the honesty and respect you deserve. You're worth so much more than someone who would lie to you about something as fundamental as whether they're married or not. Life is too short to spend it with people who don't genuinely want the best for you.